Thanks a lot for inviting to present for this presentation, and also I would start with my concerns with the Ukrainian people, mainly thinking of all for the people that are suffering, and reminding that apart that wars are useless, they also have an impact on the environment for the resources that are wrongly invested, and sometimes long-term impact. So yeah, I will start with this service enhancement. And sometimes one of the problem mainly going, so I assume that all of us, most of us are familiar with this terminology, green infrastructure, ecosystem service, and becoming mainstream. But sometimes going to the at the reality, sometimes it's difficult to transfer or to explain this. And I just was thinking how to start, and I found I found this quotation. It's back from 2014, a presentation from the environment that was asking what's the largest multinational in Europe. It's a multinational that provides food with so many services and products and offers so many jobs, and it's nature. And yeah, this relates to this figure that was previously presented. So ecosystem services is basically support for most of the things that we do. And also, to an extent, human activities are developed or based on the land. So this is key for the not only for rural development, but in particular in the rural areas. Yeah, in this slide that was previously presented, we see the transition between urban, peri-urban, and rural, and then at the scale that there are some benefits or services grouped by environmental, social, economic that are prominent or less prominent. If we want to formalize a bit more all these benefits that nature provides in a broad sense, we tend to group in three domains. One is oops. This is my presentation. Yeah, so we see mainly these three groups by provisioning, regulating, and cultural. Provisioning crops, food, timber, etc., fisheries. So this is also the services that are quite easily could be measured. So the amount of food provided, the crop, etc. Then are the regulating services that are becoming more and more relevant, and also are relevant for in the context of climate change. So we have pollination, that it's critical for the biodiversity, temperature regulation, carbon sequestration, air regulation, erosion regulation, etc. And some of these ecosystem services sometimes are more difficult to measure. And then we tend to use models, etc., because ecosystem service integrates a lot of processes that are behind, and then it's when sometimes to have some measure is not easy, and we need to go to this modeling, etc. And then we have the cultural services, recreation, aesthetic, etc., cultural identity, and we also have seen during the lockdown of the COVID that this is very, very relevant. So yeah, if we're thinking enhancing ecosystem service for rural development, it could not be done just in abstract. So we have already identified how we can conceptualize this ecosystem service and which identify which are relevant. But this is not happening alone and needs to be put in context. And where is the ecosystem service concept irrelevant? Because ecosystem service, and also was explained before, is a strategically planned network. And these three words are really relevant. It's a strategically, so it's not only something that happens because we have a forest, but it's a strategically planned. And then it has some components that has also been highlighted about the connectivity, the multifunctionality, not one single purpose, And multi-scale, it's also because natural process happen across multiple scales, so it's relevant. So it's important that if we talk about system services context of green infrastructure, we'll always have these elements in the consideration. Even we can plan at local level, but thinking how to integrate and how it relates to a larger context, how it relates. And I think there are many good examples everywhere, but just could mention, for example, Vitoria in Spain, how they plan it from the inner city to the peri-urban and the regional context. So thinking on all these elements, how are connected, and then you land in a specific area and you plan for that. So also, because I forget to mention, most of the work I'm presenting is based also on the ESPON Greta that Gemma already presented. So there are some elements that are similar, but is a good basis. So how we operationalize, and it has already been mentioned that this connectivity and this green infrastructure that is strategically planned for multiple purposes, we start with something. We start with the hotspots with high quality, and we have already a European network that is Natura 2000. And then we need to connect these elements, so are not isolated and get a full multifunctionality. So we have these connectors that could be broad range of elements from natural, semi-natural, and even certain agricultural areas with some good agricultural practices could contribute. So then we land in the ecosystem services. And here I present a range of services. Some of them were mentioned before: habitat quality, relative pollination, net ecosystem production, cross-nutrient balance, water retention, water purification, soil erosion control, and this recreation potential. As was mentioned before, those of these ecosystem services were included in the assessment, well, in the ESPON Greta, because the information was available at European wide scale. The principle could be applied at any scale with the best information available. For example, just to mention something, in Switzerland, they are developing a nice map of ecosystem services mapping across Switzerland, but for sure there are other initiatives. But just here to present some of these ecosystem services, which wide European data is available, and they provide quite a wide range. And then also these ecosystem services are not analyzed alone, because they provide certain functions, and here the functions are related to policies or what is the purpose. So always when we say enhancing ecosystem services, that it's nice, but when we move to the practice, we need to think or what is main objective. Okay, multifunctionality, but then we need to narrow a bit, or to be clear what is the range that we want to consider, and also what is not included. In that case, again, it was biodiversity is very relevant, climate change and disaster risk reduction, and water framework directive. What is also relevant, that is one ecosystem service could serve more than one policy. So we have this interconnection. This relationship is based on expert knowledge that consultation during the project. But this is relevant that we have several ecosystem services that cover a broad range, and they are linked to certain policies or objectives that we want to define that when we move to the planning for a specific policy or a specific objective that we may have. And then we have the operationalization that I will move forward one. So basically, it was already presented, this the potential network of green infrastructure as a percentage by region. We know that all these elements have a strong spatial component. Also, we have seen in terms of population dynamics, but still, Net3 is a good image or figure to start. So moving now to the ecosystem services, we have this network, and then we want to identify what is the multifunctionality or the potential of this network. And here, basically, the color is very basic. Green is very good and or more optimal, and the yellow less optimal. And then the yellow to green is how many ecosystem services so are above the median or best perform, and by ecosystem. So the analysis has been not only regionally by NATS, but also by ecosystem, because of course there are the different geographic and regional and ecosystem differences. And then the light and green, if it serves one single policy or multiple policies. So we see some areas that we have really potentially that is the green infrastructure could provide many services, and other areas that maybe some limitations. And this is a first snapshot, that because then we need more fine-grained information to learn and see really what's happening to understand. But from this, just for example, from the escape, previously was presented another map, and this is aggregated for this period, what's happening. So then we can start to think, yeah, in which the regions that maybe shrinking and losing population, start to think what is the potential that is there. So what is the potential of the existing ecosystem services, and this may indicate, okay, that we are in a water start. So we need to see how we could enhance on take most benefit on that, or where maybe some problems, and then we need to identify what are the causes. But it's not simply that we have several ecosystem services that perform better or worse. There is another element that it's very important, because ecosystem services, behind that are natural process, and nature is not isolated, there are interactions. And here come how in that case we represent. This is a region, and we have different special units. And for ecosystem 2, there is a high provision of this ecosystem service. For example, it could be high erosion protection, because we have a nice vegetation cover, etc. And here we may have a steepy area with low vegetation, so high, low provision of protection against risk. And for another ecosystem that could be, I don't know, for example, pollination potential for pollination, what we see is that we have similarities on the space. So we have high potential here. And then we say this is a synergy between both ecosystems, because processes that are behind mutually benefit. So this is interesting, because when we find this type of links, usually improving one thing, probably as a consequence, we improve other aspects. That there is some problem behind that, and then it's an area to focus. We can, so we move closer to that, not just looking at NATS level, and then we have been okay. Could provide an ecosystem, there are interactions, but then is the supply and demand. And I will exemplify with soil erosion, because soil erosion may be relevant for some rural shrinking areas. And the supply is, as mentioned, the protection of potential protection against soil erosion. And then is the risk of soil erosion. And then here, the green areas is we have maybe high demand, so it's a high supply. The yellow and red areas is where we may have problems, and then this would indicate where we need to look locally at the region and see how it could be enhanced. But on the opposite, this relates to recreation. So we see that there is potential for recreation in areas where we had low provision of, for example, erosion control. So then it provides a tool to think about that and how to combine and what elements needs to be improved. So operationalizing, we start with certain objective, or even it could be quite broad. And then we question, where are the current state of the green infrastructure? What is the potential? What are the trade-offs and synergies? And what are the imbalances between supply and demand? And this provides one part of the element. Then we could move more on the economic valuation, etc., costs and benefits. And then it helps to plan and take decisions. Finally, on the opportunities and challenges, just very quick. Well, it's needed across policy areas. Cross collaboration is really relevant, and a strategic vision needed. So always when start implementing all these ecosystem services with infrastructure, there is always somebody or some group that has a vision on that and force start the process. Yeah, well, the main challenges are all potential negative activities or uses of the land, that there is a process of finding how it could be compatible. From the economic perspective, usual external funds are used to start the process. So it takes time first to understand, to put people together, and usually an external funds, the experience is that European funds has been extremely useful. Yeah, there is a potential for job creation, but it's not always evident. The improve of know-how and links with research. And I think in Spain, we have very good examples of different research centers or technological centers that are linked to regional administrations to provide the know-how to implement these policies. Beyond that, it's very, very relevant to be connected networks that help. So for example, ESPON is a good forum to share, but there are other networks that it facilitates to understand from other areas. And then if we want really to implement that, we need to involve stakeholders from the beginning. Because as I said at the beginning, sometimes this concept is not evident for everybody. And maybe the process may be slow, but it's important that all the people involved, because otherwise there are high chances that it would fail. The context is very important, thinking on the best practices, and also extremely needed is monitor progress and adapt to change. So it's not we have one time analysis snapshot. We need to adapt to change. So through monitoring, we see what needs to be changed. And thanks a lot for your attention.